Purpose of this video is to introduce Partizan as a category of the brutality matches to a couple of my friends who are interested in coming out to a brutality match, and to give a basic introduction for what gear I would recommend for a person who is new to the brutality matches. Not necessarily as a best set of kit to make sure that you're gonna win Partizan, but rather an introductory kit that will allow you to enjoy your time competing and hopefully save some effort on the unending gear comparison that often has new shooters and experienced shooters get way too far down in the minutia, worrying about whether or not this or that piece of gear is going to make the difference. For a new shooter, I think going with something that's pretty basic and will probably be fine is a much better strategy than trying to get the right loadout before you do your first big match. You're going to have a better time if you just have something that will probably work and will let you get out there and try that setup and then know what you want going on from that. So I'm going to start with the thing that everybody cares about the most, and I'm going to give a very boring answer there, and then I'll get on to some of the details specific to Partizan. So in terms of what rifle should you bring, very simple. You should bring an AR-15 that you have used at local matches, period. That's it. Does it need to be what would Stoner do? Nope. AR-15 takes NATO magazines, is in 5.56, probably be fine. What would Stoner do is great, and it will be a little bit easier to use, but basically any AR is going to not get in your way at a brutality match. What handgun should you bring? It's going to be a pretty similar story. It should be a polymer 9mm thing that you've shot in local matches a lot. The key thing for both of these is it should be something that you're very familiar with, that you've used a lot, and you know how to run. And we'll get into the sighting systems for what you should use when we talk about points. But in both of these cases, if you have no idea what you should be getting, well, shoot some local matches first. And what you use well at a local match is what you should bring to a national match. The answer on those is really simple, because the key thing is just that you've used something that you've tested, and beyond that doesn't really make a huge difference. So those are the guns that you should bring. Things that you've used at a local match that have worked well for you and have not caused you any trouble. When you're competing in Partizan, there is a minimum loadout, and there are things you can spend points on. The minimum loadout is equipment that you're required to have with you for every stage, at the start of every stage. And the points are specifics to mostly your firearms that will give you a boost in terms of making some part of the competition easier. So I'll start by going over the things that you can spend points on. And to make it really easy to start off with, in Partizan you can spend 3 points, and 2 of those points you should immediately spend on optics. The other point is something that you should choose what to spend it on, but if this is your first time competing in Partizan, you should spend 2 points on optics. So the first thing that you should do is you should put an optic on your handgun. I would probably recommend a closed emitter optic. I've got a Delta Point Pro on this handgun that I've used in brutalities. It's been fine for me. The weather conditions may mean that a closed emitter optic is a better choice. So that's what I would recommend if you're picking one. But it should definitely be something that you've tried at a local match. Optic on the handgun and an optic on the rifle. Now, the way an optic works in this kind of match is that it's 1 point per reticle. So for example, I've got a red dot on my What Would Stoner Do right now. That would be 1 point. If I put a 3x magnifier behind the red dot, it's still only 1 point because there's only a reticle in the red dot. Similarly, if I swapped out for a scope of some kind, there's one reticle in the scope, and so that counts as 1 point. If you have a piggyback dot on a scope, then that would be 2 points. Should you use a red dot? Should you use a red dot in a magnifier? Should you use a low power variable? You should use whatever you've used at a local match. I don't think that you will necessarily be let down by any of these choices, but I think that you should understand very well what it is that you are likely to struggle with. Personally, my eyesight isn't great. I have run a 3x magnifier at a number of competitions and found that I struggle with target identification through the multiple panes of glass that stand between you and a target with a 3x and a magnifier. If you decide to do a low power variable, the main thing that I would tell you to make sure that you understand is, can you get a good sight picture from an awkward position? Shooting under something, shooting around something. You should be able to shoot from every position on a VTAC with it if you're going to bring a scope. So, 2 of your points should be spent straight off on an optic on your pistol and an optic on your rifle. That leaves 1 point that you can spend on one of the following. So you could bring high capacity pistol mags, high capacity rifle mags, a bipod, a compensator on your pistol, or a brace on your handgun. Now, in all of those cases, what you should bring, whether it's high cap mags, or a bipod, or a compensator or a brace for your handgun, should really be about mitigating what you consider to be the limiting factor for you. If you are somebody who has a lot of trouble spotting your own hits, so I tend to get thrown around by recoil a lot, even on a soft recoiling rifle, and so a bipod might be a good choice for me. If you're someone who has maybe like limited hand strength, and so after one mag your hands get a little shaky with a pistol, a brace might be a great choice. The catch with a brace is that it has to be holsterable, which will mean that you have to change your equipment for that. But of all of those choices, there aren't any that are wrong per se. I think that there are some that are much more likely to be useful for you than others. So for example, high capacity rifle mags, 40 round or 60 round drum mags for a rifle are pretty unlikely to make a difference for you when you can bring 30 round mags pretty easily for your rifle, and a lot of your equipment is going to be designed for 30 round rifle mags. But something like a brace on the handgun or a bipod on the rifle can make a really big difference on specific stages. So two points you should definitely spend on optics on both your guns. That third point you could spend on any of those things, or you could spend on a second optic on your rifle. So for example, if you went with a scope with a piggyback dot, that would be 2 optics, 2 points on the rifle, and that's a decision that you can make. So that's the point system. Then there's the minimum loadout. And the minimum loadout is going to bring me to the rest of the equipment that I have and the suggestions that I'm going to make for what you should bring. So you need to have 4 primary mags. That's 4 rifle mags. Those that counts anything that starts in the gun. Although if you have an empty gun start, that 4th mag needs to be somewhere. So I recommend having capacity on your equipment to store at least 4 mags anyway. 2 secondary mags, that's at least 2 pistol mags, which if there's a stage where you're shooting pistol, you're going to want more than 2 mags anyway. We'll talk about how I recommend a new shooter set up their equipment for carrying things and how many magazines I'd recommend. You'll need a fixed blade knife, a med kit, a liter or quart of water, and any maintenance equipment that you're going to use during the match. So I would recommend a belt and chest rig system. You can use a variety of different things. I think that this is going to be the most comfortable and also easy to change around, because I would recommend that you prove out whatever equipment that you want to wear in as many local competitions as you can, because you'll find that maybe it's something about your personal body or the way that you run your guns or the way that you personally drop to prone, or any number of factors will mean that there'll be a thing that you want to change from what I'm recommending. If it feels like you want to do that in a local match, great. Try it, make the change that you think would be a good idea, run it in a local match once you've made the change, and then bring an equipment setup that you are reasonably happy with and you've run through at least one local match to a big Brutality match, and you'll be all right. So in order to accommodate that set of equipment, I run a belt system, first off, and I think that a lot of the choices that you might make about which belt system to use, which magazine pouches to use, those are not ones that you should worry too much about. So for example, the STAC Kiwis, perfectly good magazine pouch. The Taco magazine pouches, perfectly fine. Don't worry too much about that. Make sure that they are relatively good retention, that if you throw yourself down in a prone, that your magazines are going to come out. That's something that you test at a local match. But don't wrap yourself around the axle trying to figure out what exactly is the best belt system, because the difference between a pretty good belt system and another pretty good belt system is mostly going to be personal preference. So there are a variety out there. Try one, look at what other people at local matches are using, get one and start running it. You'll have personal feelings about it and want to make a change, or more likely, you'll get one that works pretty well and you'll find that minor differences between belt systems aren't going to be the thing that really holds you back. So I've got my belt system set up to hold 3 pistol mags and 1 rifle mag, which tends to be everything that you'll need in a stage. It's pretty unlikely for you to need more than 1 spare rifle mag or 3 pistol mags. Brutality matches will sometimes have a very pistol heavy stage, like stage 2 at 2025's Woodland Brutality, which was pretty easy to run through 50 rounds of ammo in. Stage 3 was also a 3-spinner stage that was pretty easy to run through a lot of ammo in. We'll talk in a minute about how to load extra ammo into your kit for stages like that. But all of these run left side because I'm right-handed, and so these are right under my left hand and easy to get to. I've got a med kit on my belt. This contains you can run in a med kit like this on your belt the minimums that you need for Brutality Match. So you can run your med kit in a different place. I'll cover that when I get to my chest rig. But you probably personally don't need 2 different med kits. I wouldn't recommend it. It's more space than you need to allocate to that. But this is 2 different options shown. I also run water on the belt. One thing that I personally recommend, so I have a water bottle. This is a liter water bottle that fits perfectly in this pouch. I see a lot of folks at Brutality Matches have compliance water because you have to have a minimum of a liter of water on you at the start of every stage. They'll have dedicated water bottles that are like taped into their kit so that it's very clear that they're not drinking that water, and they always have the minimum amount. Personally, I think it's better to have one set of water that I'm constantly topping off, and having the anxiety of, oh, I better have a liter in this bottle when the stage starts, helps me think about topping off my water, which helps me think about drinking enough. It's a backwards way of doing it, but I think that's probably a better plan for how to carry your water and to make sure that you're drinking enough, is to tie those 2 things together. Then finally, I have the pistol and a dump pouch. Dump pouch is really useful at a Brutality Match because of 2 reasons. One, you may have a stage where it's really muddy, or if you're doing a Western Brutality Match, they tend to be very dusty, with dust that's not great for magazine function or reliability. And so sometimes it can be really beneficial to drop your mags into a dump pouch. If you watch my 2025 Woodland Brutality trench run stage, you'll see I drop all of my mags into my dump pouch because the trench has pallets at the edge to hold the dirt back, and it's very easy to lose a magazine into the pallets. So I cost myself a couple seconds over the course of the stage by dropping them in here in order to not lose any mags. So a belt setup like this will probably work pretty well for you for most of the things you need to put your hands on during a stage. And having all of your kit on a belt that's easy to take off will be very comfortable during the match. Much of the time, you'll be not shooting. And so having a belt that you can put on and take off in 5 seconds means that when you're doing reset, when you're minding your other folks who are in your squad with you and reminding them to drink so that they don't dehydrate, you don't have to be carrying all of this on you. So that's what I would recommend, why I would recommend a belt system that you can take on and off really quickly. And this is another thing, I'm gonna hit this until you're sick of it, but another thing, notice I said get a pistol that works for you. I would strongly recommend, if you are new to a Brutality, and if you've only done a couple local matches and you're looking for kit, I've told you that, get a belt system. There are a bunch of different options, don't sweat it. Whatever belt system looks good to you, seems like it'll work with the way that your body works, great. I've told you magazine pouches are kind of magazine pouches, don't worry about it too much. If you don't know what holster to get a Safariland ALS for your pistol. The reason for that is a Brutality Match is going to be very physical, and so there's going to be a lot of fast movement. You're going to be crawling through things, under things, and the easiest way to DQ is to have a pistol that comes out of your holster. So the ALS holster system is the best that I have seen for having really, really strong retention. That means that no matter what's going on, your pistol stays in the holster while also being pretty smooth to draw and automatically re-engaging on holstering, which is something that's very useful in a Brutality Match, because if there's a part where you have a high value target, you shoot your pistol empty, and then you need to holster it, you don't have to fiddle around with reattaching a retention system. Holster it, give it a in and out tug to check to make sure that it's seated properly, and then you're good to go. You don't need to worry about it. So that's the belt system that I would recommend. Something like this should cover most of the needs that you'll have on a stage regularly. Then the chest rig system covers the things that you probably won't need, but need to have. So for example, my chest rig is set up with mostly stuff on the front. The back is pretty spare. The reason for that is that really keeps the bulk down on anything that might catch. So if you're crawling under something, or if you're crawling through a tube, the part of you that you can't see is what will catch on something. And so having the back of your belt be fairly spare, or things that aren't very likely to catch, having the back of your chest rig be fairly spare is very good. It also means that your rifle, if slung, has less to get caught up on. So my chest rig is set up with a 3 rifle mag core that I've added a couple pouches to. So these 3 rifle mags plus the 1 rifle mag that's on the belt total the 4 that you're required to have. So with all of those full, that's your magazines that you're required to have. Then a spare magazine, double magazine pouch here provides flexibility. If you're going into a long range stage where you think you might have to shoot 1,000 rounds of rifle ammo, you'll time out before that happens, don't worry. But if you feel like you need additional rifle ammo, you can tuck additional rifle mags into these pouches. And they're relatively quick to get to something like this. You can also do the same, but for pistol mags, if you're going into a pistol heavy stage. So I recommend having your compliance magazines set up, and then a little bit of flexible storage, which could be your dump pouch. If you're a really small person and you want to have as little as possible on your gear, you can use your dump pouch for that purpose. I've got my compliance knife. You may need to use it in a stage. There are often stages where you need to cut a wire, stab a dummy, something like that, open a can of beans, whatever. You have to use your knife for something. Then finally, I've got 2 pouches here. One is the medical pouch. The requirements for the medical kit for Brutality Match are pretty spare. You need 1 trauma dressing, you need a roll of gauze, and you need a tourniquet. So I'd probably recommend a little bit more than that, just because if you're going to have a med kit on your pouch, a med kit pouch on your kit, you might as well have a basic loadout for a blowout kit. Chest seals, I'd recommend adding. In addition to a roll of regular gauze, which you can use for wound packing, get some kind of quick clot or similar gauze. And gloves, maybe a spare tourniquet, so you have 2. Anyway, you can fit those either into a dangler or onto a belt pouch, whichever one is more comfortable for you. I know some folks who run a dangler as a dump pouch because it's right in the center of your body. It's easy to access. That's personal preference. Again, that's like which magazine pouch to use. That's something that it's probably not going to matter too much, and whatever way you set it up first, you'll decide you want to run it a different way, set up your kit to run it a different way, and then either go back to the first one or pick a third one and run on like that forever. Don't worry about that too much. Then finally, some kind of general admin pouch within which you can have all of the stuff that you might need. There are other folks who've done videos. You can look at folks who, especially people who have done trooper runs, about what to have in this kit. I've got a pretty spare example here. Batteries for everything that takes batteries on your guns and any accessories that you have. What I have done is I've got a little baggie with everything that I would need to work on my guns stripped down to be as light as possible. So for example, you know, every possible Allen key or hex key to tighten everything on all of my guns in the smallest form factor available. This means that if I need to tighten the dot or the forend or the safety, anything that needs to be tightened, I've got the key for it, but I'm not lugging around any keys I don't need. I recommend also a clearing rod, one of the sectional steel ones, because they're relatively inexpensive and are strong. I don't want to have one in my kit right at the moment because it got broken removing a round from someone else's gun, where a 6.5 Creedmoor got dropped into a 308 on accident. But that's exactly why I recommend you have one, because just because you don't own a 300 Blackout doesn't mean that a 300 Blackout can't somehow magically teleport its way into one of your magazines or one of your squad mates' magazines. And so having a clearing rod is a good idea. And I also recommend, this is a paint can opener. Have that relatively available on your kit. You can see that this is bungeed in on my chest rig such that I could reach my rifle with it if I needed to clear a really stubborn stuck case. So that's the general setup that I recommend for everything to bring to a Brutality. There are a couple other things that I wanted to say about philosophy for your first Partizan run. I would recommend doing everything that you can to reduce the mental load that you have during the day when you're shooting. So for example, I will usually run, so I run a Glock. I'll have, you know, not hundreds, but dozens of loaded 17 round mags in my car. And so when I shoot a stage that involves the pistol, and I've got at the end of it 3 partial 17 round mags, those go in a used mag bin, and I don't worry about them until I get home. I take freshly loaded magazines from my fresh magazine bin and I refill all my kit. That saves you ever having to think about reloading magazines during the match. You're probably only going to use, you know, a couple magazines, you know, probably only 1 rifle magazine per stage on average. And so having, you know, 4 like compliance magazines to start with, plus 1 to 2 mags per stage of rifle loaded, that'll get you through without ever having to worry about consolidating ammo. And pistol is pretty similar, except probably average 2 mags per stage. And while this is not something I'd recommend if you're trying to do a trooper loadout, because you'll end up with a ton of extra weight, doing it that way for a Partizan run means that you don't have to worry about the physical logistics of checking your magazines and re-upping your stuff during the day, which saves you more than you might think in terms of worry. So that's what I would recommend for a general loadout. You know, where to put things, what to have on your belt, what to have on your chest rig. There are a lot of items here where I haven't listed what I specifically use. And in those cases, if I haven't specifically said, here's what I would recommend, it's probably a thing that won't make a massive difference in your first run in terms of whether or not you have fun. If you want to learn how to win a brutality, don't look at me. I'm not your guy. Look at Sinister Rifleman or Concealed Liberal or some of the other guys who've done videos about their loadouts that are, you know, from people who can win. I'm a guy who can have fun. So I would tell you, test out your stuff at a local match. Don't worry about doing everything perfectly. Just worry about being safe and having fun. Things like which magazine pouches, which sling, you know, which manufacturer of the gear that you're using, don't worry about it. Get something that is relatively good, and at least a number of people have said, yeah, I use that. You can do that by going to a local match and seeing what everybody else is using. If you see 3 or 4 people who are using a piece of kit, it's probably okay. And get your setup the way that seems reasonable to you. Test it out at a local match, and then you'll know what you want to change before you come to a brutality. So that's what I would recommend for all of the things to bring out to a brutality match. I hope that's useful, and Seneca hopes that is useful as well.